There's some horrible Sea of Thieves advice floating around out there, and a lot of these tips are fooling newer players into making poor decisions that will only lead to them losing their loot to the first player they fight. But it's not their fault. In fact, some of that advice is coming from the game itself. I knew I had to make this video when I saw this message pop up on screen when completing the new Sea of Thieves tutorial, which the game forces every new player to do at least once. Anchor the ship? Rare. Do better. If you are a new player to Sea of Thieves, let me explain. You do not want to anchor your ship when arriving at an island. It doesn't matter if you're there for a tall tale, a company voyage, or a world event. Don't do it. Why? Because an anchored ship is a sitting duck for any other player ship that spies you on the seas and decides to make an attack run. By the time you see them, if you see them, you'll have to waste time trying to raise your anchor and get yourself in a fighting position. And in a fight on the Sea of Thieves, every second counts. Instead, learn to feel out the appropriate time to start to raise the sails before arriving at an island. A good starting point would be when you see the island banner appear across your screen. If you're going too fast or too slow, use your harpoons at the bow of the ship to get yourself in the best position possible for potential quick getaway, pointing your ship away from the island. And speaking of island banners, another quick tip. Don't use the default island banner. It covers up a portion of both the top and bottom of your screen, and considering that vital stats like your current health and ammo amount are located where that bottom header appears, it could be terrible for you if you found yourself in combat with another player and suddenly an island's banner appeared, blocking your vision. Instead, use Slimline, which only covers a smaller top portion of your screen, or, when you know the map well enough, no banner at all. But Jon, you say, all I would need to do is sail against the wind and then everything will be fine. They'll never be able to catch up to me. This is horrible advice today. You see, this may have been the case in years past, but in recent times, the developers of Sea of Thieves have been making efforts to normalize what they consider to be issues related to ship speeds on the seas. This was most apparent during the release of the Skull of Siren Song content update, where adjustments were made to ship speeds across the board to try and mitigate unfair advantages. Unfortunately, these adjustments have not always gone to plan, and there are instances today on the seas where, as a sloop, you may find yourself at a speed disadvantage against the wind. Rare has just recently gone on record and said they'll be taking another crack at this in the near future, but don't rely on this alone. Instead, focus on your maneuverability, especially against galleons, and use terrains to your advantage. Here's another piece of advice that's about as helpful as a compass that just points to the sea. Many players will tell others to buy a storage crate and go through the outpost they spawn at, simply hitting collect all when at barrels, and you'll have plenty of supplies for your session. While yes, you'll gather supplies, you've got to keep in mind that you're only gathering supplies unique enough for each slot in the storage crate, 16 spaces total. So if you fill your storage crate with fireworks and worms as an example, you may be missing out on some nicer supplies, like this grog ball for instance. My recommendation? Leave the bait and fireworks behind unless you have a particular reason for bringing them along. And another quick tip. Merchants love to take your money, but don't necessarily love to give you what you paid for. Take for instance my storage crate. Mildred here knows I paid for it, but doesn't want to give it up. A way around this bug is to go to another shop like the shipwright or various equipment stores on the outpost and purchase one thing. For some reason, that will allow the merchant representative to finally give you what you originally paid for. Sometimes the Sea of Thieves be extra capitalist, you know? Here's one for all you folks who are getting attacked on the seas with a treasure trove of loot on board. Maybe you don't want to commit to a ship fight for whatever reason, so you're gunning for the nearest outpost to sell your most valuable loot and regroup. There may come a point where you have someone attempting to board your ship via ladder. I can't tell you how many times I've heard some players say, just have your blunderbuss ready and shoot when they're at the top. Wrong. Here's why, and it's part of critique on the game and on players. First, the game. The game is notorious for what's known as hit reg, or hit registration detection. New players may be unfamiliar with this, at least I hope you are, but trust me, it's there. You can shoot every single bullet at an enemy, but if the game doesn't detect it and register it as a hit, it won't count. Now, with the blunderbuss, it's effectively a short-range shotgun blast, but it will only one-tap and kill a player if enough of those bullets are detected. Otherwise, they'll be able to board, and now you're potentially panicking and on the defensive. And as far as defensive players go, there are some that go right to the edge of the ladder to wait for their enemy to approach and blast them. Sounds good, right? Except the attacking player, if they have the reflexes, can actually fire at you from the ladder by letting go, letting off a shot, and then re-grabbing the ladder. Usually it'll be a blunder of their own that may in fact insta-kill you instead. And now you're on the ferry while your ship is under enemy control. So what do you do instead? Don't even engage at the ladder. Instead, make sure you have blunder bombs on hand. When you can see or hear someone climbing up the ladder, throw the blunder bomb in their general direction. The blunder bomb is a weapon that provides a splash damage effect, even when the enemy is shielded by your ship's hull. Hey, don't look at me like that. I didn't make it that way. But you can use this to your advantage to decrease the risk to you and your ship by simply forcing the opponent off before they get a real shot at climbing up. I know it's not glorious compared to getting that nice kill, but 9 times out of 10, it's the safer play for you keeping your loot. This next one's going to be a little controversial. It's been nearly half a year since Safer Seas was released, and for all the doomsaying that went around prior to its launch, Sea of Thieves is arguably in its strongest position player base wise in years, thanks to it, a revamped gameplay circuit, and of course the launch of the game on the PlayStation 5. But many of these new players are told, ignore Safer Seas, just select High Seas. There's no better way to get used to the game than playing with everyone. And I used to think like this too, honestly. And then my girlfriend started to play Sea of Thieves, and I realized very quickly that unlike when I came into the game back in its opening days, where no one really knew what they were doing and we were all learning together, new players come into a totally different situation today. There are players with potentially 6-year head starts on today's swabbies. You, watching this video, might be one of them, and that can be extremely intimidating for a new player. Other games have ranking systems like ELO, which helps to curve the game appropriately for a player's relative skill level. But to public knowledge, Sea of Thieves does not have an ELO for general high seas gameplay, so that level of protection isn't there. And that's one of the major reasons why Safer Seas was built. So all that being said, play High Seas or play Safer Seas. Play the game you feel most comfortable playing and take your time getting used to it. I'm gonna follow that one up with an oldie but a goodie. You aren't a real Sea of Thieves player until you play with this weapon or this loadout. Whether it's sword lording, double gunning, or nowadays the throwing knife and the double barrel pistol. I'm kidding. But seriously, trying to gatekeep a video game around someone's playstyle is not only horrible advice, it's just sad. Are there legitimate instances where double gunning is best? Yes, 100%. Are there similar instances where a player can swing a sword around like a maniac and have a great time? Absolutely. So instead of focusing on one weapon to use in-game, focus on being adaptable to the circumstances that you're in and choosing the optimal weapon for that situation for you. That being said, there is a flip side to this argument as well around fighting. There are quite a few number of players that have sworn off Hourglass in-game, which is the PvP matchmaking system built within High Seas, claiming it's not fun. And they'll give the advice to new players to just ignore it, don't even interact with it. But when you dig into this deeper, many times the people claiming it's not fun aren't saying it for completely truthful reasons. It may not be fun to them, but that doesn't mean that anyone should be deterred from at least experiencing Hourglass PvP for themselves. For me, Hourglass is a great way to step away from the usual experience in Sea of Thieves and try something a bit more on rails but action heavy, where matches can be over in a matter of minutes, hopefully, and you can move on to the next encounter. However, if someone rolls up on you in a ship with flames on its bow and asks you to touch the Hourglass for an achievement, don't. One last note about PvP encounters. I know there's been a lot of chatter over the past year around cheating, how prevalent cheating is, and how everyone is using aimbot or some other form of cheating software. It's just not true. There's a small, tiny contingent of players who, for one reason or another, have used cheats to gain an advantage. But the vast majority of the time, the people you're going to encounter nowadays on the seas are just going to be good players. I can't speak to how well easy anti-cheat is working from a developer perspective, but from my own circumstantial evidence as a player, seems to be doing alright by me. Now I stream on YouTube and Twitch every Saturday at 10 AM PST, 1 PM EST, 6 PM GMT +1, and I like to ask fellow players of the Sea of Thieves their opinions from time to time. Well, I asked about horrible advice they've heard of or received, and got some doozies. Let's talk alliances. Spooky Jacoboy mentioned that he'd been told alliance flags make you lose gold, and that made me think. There actually isn't really an alliance tutorial in Sea of Thieves. Unlike things like the trading companies or Hourglass, the game, as I recall, gives no indication of what alliances are and how to use them. You have to be told about them from someone else on the seas. Maybe that's intentional, but then you come across situations like Spooky's where there's a dash of misinformation. To be clear, alliances do not make you lose gold. The selling crew of the alliance earns 100% of the sold treasure. All alliance crews earn 50% of the sold gold, where originally they would have earned 0%. Now, you could argue that alliance crews can turn on each other for 100% of the loot anyway, but that's a different topic. Personally, I don't mind organic alliances made on the seas, but I'm not trusting you anywhere near my world events. Also, communicate with the players you meet with. Whether it's through typing, pirate quick responses, or full voice chat, you will feel more immersed in the game and also have a stronger ability to build, even temporarily, relationships on the seas. Compare that to the silent crew that's approaching your ship, and they're getting no quarter. Tell me you've been in this situation before. You're on an adventure, either solo or with a crew. You've been grabbing treasure, feeling pretty good about your time on the seas so far, and you spot another ship on the horizon. Maybe it's just a sloop. Maybe it has no cosmetics on it, and you hear someone say the magic words. Let's just take them out. Wrong. Look, I'm not saying to not go fight them, but you have to consider any player ship that you encounter as a threat. Just because you may be in a galleon and they're in a sloop, that does not mean you'll dominate. There are too many good players out there on the seas that can turn the tide of battle with careless mistakes on their opponent's parts. And soon all the work that you've been putting in will have been lost. So just consider your options. Is it a good time to turn in first? Maybe you want to keep an eye on them from now, see exactly what they'll do. Or if nothing else, plan out the attack with your crew in advance so that everyone knows what they need to do in the heat of the battle. Any of those things can make the difference between a successful steal and a sudden defeat. Now, if you want some actually good advice, watch my video on what I wish I knew before starting Sea of Thieves. Like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more. Until next time, so long and take care.